Hello everybody and welcome to another incense video. In this video we're going to learn another ceremony, which is to use the plate. She has here a silver plate. As we spoke about, the plates could be made of many things. They can be made of antique porcelain or pottery that's been ground, or modern pottery, or jade, or mica is very common, as is in our sets, and silver is actually very, very common. Silver is a really good one for a lot of ceremonies. Most of the steps in the ceremony are similar to the simpler ceremonies that we learned before. The methods are really consistent through all the ceremonies. So that's why we had that practice video that went through the methods, so you can just practice those methods over and over and over again. Do them cold, and the more you practice, the better you'll get. So let's get started with this ceremony. We, of course, like most ceremonies, we can start with a bow, and you can see that a lot of the parts of the ceremonies also are very similar to tea. If you study the 5 basics of tea, there's similarities, like we try not to cross the center, use the left side with our left hand, right side with our right hand, try to keep the hands on the table and use one at a time, or if you're using both, then you're using both. But if you're not, you can kind of keep connected. So a lot of that is very, very, very similar. So let's get started. Okay, after we bow, then we can start with this method. So once again, she's going to clean the chopsticks. And we're going to start by putting the charcoal on the flame. And again, in our tradition, we use a candle. Some people use a lighter. You can use a lighter. And remember, we chop these pieces of charcoal in half. So, and we use the steak knife and just go around and around and around all 4 sides, and then saw it and get it in half, because the original ones are too big. Now she's loosening the ash. Smaller and smaller circles, smaller and smaller circles. And then cleaning the chopsticks off again. We don't really like the lighter, because it just is disruptive. But if that's all you have and you don't have a candle yet, you can use a lighter, of course, because to use the candle you need this metal piece that sits over it. She said this is a time for a little bit of peace and waiting. We want to let the charcoal light a little bit. So of course we can just meditate, and you notice she keeps her hands on the xiangxi, like the chashi, the stage, just waiting for the charcoal. 对那个炭烧一点啊。Every time clean the chopsticks. So you're going to turn the charcoal over. Clean the chopsticks again, every time. And she brings it close. Again, you can bring the censer close to the place where you've lit your charcoal, whether that's a plate or you have a little bowl like this for lighting. And we're going to put the charcoal in. Bring it close again so you don't drop it, and the charcoal could burn your table or burn your cloth. And we put the charcoal in, it's flush with the ash in the center. And once again, clean the chopsticks. And just like before, she's going to start raking the ash. Raking the ash. This is the first skill that we have to practice. And remember, it's good to practice this cold. Just practice over and over and over again, raking the ash. Once again, notice that the chopsticks stay in the same place and the censer turns. Just like when washing the bowl in tea. You have the foundation hand doesn't move and the guide hand turns the bowl. Just like that. In this case, the chopsticks are just going up and down in the same place, and the hand is turning. So find the place where you're going to put your chopsticks where it's comfortable for you to rake that ash, and then use your other hand, your left hand, or it's your off hand. So if you're left-handed, you would switch these two things, but you're using your off hand to just turn the sensor, turn the sensor, turn the sensor, and the strong hand just rakes the ash up, gently rakes it to the top, using just the tips of the chopsticks. Slowly, slowly, around and around, again and again. Now she's going to use one, and she's going to check the charcoal. 确定那个碳不动啊. So she's checking the charcoal, make sure the depth is right, just like in the previous ceremony. Make sure the depth is right, make sure it didn't move when you were raking. And now we're going to start with compressing the ash. Very slowly, sensor turning, and the chopstick going up and down, up and down. And the turns are about the size of the chopstick. So you want the turn to be about the same size as the chopstick, so that each turn as the chopstick comes down, you've moved about the distance of, or the width of the chopstick itself, so that you're slowly, slowly compressing the ash. This is the second skill that we're going to practice, and practice cold, practice it a lot, practice this often. This is the second of the 3 skills. In this ceremony, we're actually not going to use the third, which you remember was to create an indentation on the top of the ash to put the aloes wood in. But because in this method we're using a plate, we don't need to do that third thing. So we're just going to be using the first 2, raking up the ash and compressing the ash. Once again, you could use the kind of spatula tool, piece of bamboo or piece of wood that's been sanded and very fine and smooth. You could do that. It's a little bit easier to do this step that way, but this is a better way. Just tap, tap, tap very gently with the chopsticks and turn the sensor. And each turn is a little tick, almost like a clock. And each tick is the size of the chopsticks. That's really important. And the chopstick is about a 45-degree angle. And if you look into the jar when you're done, you'll see all the marks near the edge of the jar where the tip of the chopstick was going in and out, or sensor. This, of course, is a tea jar that we've used mitate to make into an incense censer. Slowly, slowly, round and around, compressing the ash. Compressing the ash isn't just for aesthetics. It also is forcing more of the heat from the charcoal to move straight up, which is up into the incense, as opposed to escaping out the sides of the ash. Very fine. And she makes it look very easy, but it is very difficult. Once you start practicing, you'll understand why using that spatula tool is just so much easier, because you can pat, 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 and then even scrape, as she did in that video slowly, like to make everything smooth. This process is very slow and very meticulous and requires a lot of mindfulness. It's really good. So this is the second skill, just practice, practice, practice. I recommend practicing all 3 of the skills over and over and over and over again. Even though when you're using a plate, you're not going to use the third skill. Still, it's worth practicing all 3 together over and over and over and over again. And remember, we want the charcoal to be about a centimeter, a little less, or a centimeter down into the ash. So fine. Once again, clean the chopsticks every time.有确定它的热吗？你知道啊？
如果
可以
说
用
我们
手吗
不确定的话，可以用手。但是因为我们刚刚用的是这个银的，那我一直是在这个洞的上面，一直在压，所以它那个热会经过银，所以你会觉得它热热的，一直有过来。
Oh, okay. So she's left the hole that she made because when we use the plate, we have to have a hole in the center. Remember when we make the indentation out of ash, we covered that hole back up. But in this one, we've left the hole. And if you're not sure if the temperature's right, you can put your finger over it to test, she said. But she's able to tell because the chopstick, as she was going around compressing, you can see the chopstick was hovering over the hole with each press. And because it's silver, it's metal, the hole of the chopstick was getting warm. So she's feeling the heat in the chopstick that as she's going, that she's very sensitive, and that lets her know that the temperature was right. But you could at this stage check with your finger. Okay, so now we're going to put the plate. Yeah, 要放影片啊. And she has these tweezers, and they're held in this very special way. So they're held between the index and middle finger. Yeah.
夹住，
And then
然
you
后
use the
放在
across your hand, and then you're going to use your thumb to squeeze the tweezers. You might have just normal tweezers that you're using in some other way, but these are the like really special, beautiful silver ones. And that's how you grab the plate. Yep. And very, very carefully, to be very careful to not smudge too much.
可以用手这里帮你撑高。
Oh, so she says for this, she likes to make a fist with her other hand, with her other hand, and support the hand that's putting it down. So you see, she's used her left hand, her off arm, to support her right hand, so she can put it down ever so gently, because you don't want to close the hole that's underneath it. And you also got to make sure it's sturdy. So we want to make sure the plate's not going to move around, and you also want to make sure you don't smush that hole. So it's a really good idea to make a fist or use your arm, and then put your hand on top of it to kind of stabilize yourself to make it right. Now she has some incense. Because these are, often we use a scoop and the feather, but this was done using the slicing cutting method. So we actually have pieces here. So she can use the chopsticks, because they're a little bigger, she can use the chopsticks to put them on the plate. But oftentimes we would have this on a scoop, and just like in the other ceremony, we would use the feather to brush it onto the plate. But because these are bigger pieces, we can use the chopsticks and put them on. But otherwise, they'll go on the same way as when we were using the ash. Yeah, 确定那个香来啊。
对，它放下去，它味道就已经开始出来了。
The moment she put it down, she said the fragrance started coming up.
对，那如果它没有香味，我们就用这个银的这个香火柱，再把它压一下，让它更接近那个火。
If the fragrance isn't coming up, we would want to take the chopsticks and compress the plate just a little bit down closer to the charcoal so that there's more heat. Now she's made sure the fragrance is coming out. You don't want to do this until you're sure the fragrance is coming out. She smelled it right away, but if you might need to compress it a little bit down more towards the charcoal. But once you're sure, then you can clean off the censer, clean all the ash off the edges, that got there from your raking or compressing. Clean everything off. Clean off the feather in the cloth.
它有一点点高，所以我们把它。
She didn't like she felt it was a little bit not centered and not perfectly flat. And you do want to make sure that it's really stable and in a really good place before you pass it around to your guests. So you're going to check the fragrance before she hands to her guest also. Make sure everything's going as it should. So you want to make all those little corrections at the end before you pass it around. Be very careful setting it down, picking it up. And it's amazing that the plate actually, how much it influences the energy and the fragrance of the incense. And of course, different types of plate, jade or ceramic or silver, and then even the depth of the plate all make a difference. But it's very different than when the incense is in just the indentation you make with ash. It has a very different fragrance and a very different frequency. So using a plate versus using just ash also just, it's not only, ash is a little bit more convenient maybe, because it's really hard to put that plate down in the right place. That's a really a difficult step, and that's something else that you can practice. So you can practice cold. Just take a mound and take whatever tweezers you've got, fancy ones like this or another type, and just practice, putting your arm down and using your other arm, and practice very stably putting the plate down again and again and again, because it actually is really hard. It's easy for it to move, and you can practice like getting it in the right spot. And you will find probably that just practicing that third step and making the indentation in the ash itself and not using a plate ends up being an easier way for you to get started. But using a plate really does create a very, very different experience. So eventually we have to add this skill to our repertoire as well, so that we can choose to use an ash indentation, or we can choose to use a plate for our ceremonies.